Yo, what is up, guys? Snap here. Today we're going to be talking about some updates to the sorcerer that we have been talking about for the 1.1 last epoch cycle. And today I'm going to be presenting you the BIS Giga Tank Mana Tank Sorc that I've come up with here. So basically, this is a much higher threshold of gear. And let me preface this by saying that this build is enabled by stuff that drops from the Pinnacle boss. It also is enabled by stuff like Intelligence Red Rings. So just know that this is the kind of gear level that we're talking about. It is, however, a very good candidate to try and push to maybe 3000 corruption if you want to, just because of the miraculous defenses that you can pull off as a result of your large mana pool. Now, if you haven't already, I would watch my first video on this particular build. Most of the stuff is going to be pretty relevant here, but there's a few adjustments here that you can make to the build to just make it extra tanky. So first off, we're going to be building around the helmet, which drops from the Pinnacle boss, the Seed of Echidrazil. Gives you some mana, some health, some chance to avoid damage, but really what we're after here is the damage dealt to mana before health, and then also the endurance applies to all damage dealt to mana. So this helmet has 28% of your damage dealt to mana. You slam a T7 onto the chest. You can spec 20% on the tree here. You can get an additional 9% on the relic here. This brings you to 87% damage taken to mana before health. And the reason why this is really good, your endurance is going to be applying to any damage that goes to your mana, which means you have 33% additional damage reduction dealt to your mana that you didn't have before. Additionally, if you're unaware about mind over matter tanking builds in last epoch, every point of mana counts for 5 points of health when it comes to the damage calculation. So it functionally serves as 80% damage reduction. So on top of the fact that this build is already generating a gargantuan amount of ward, you have another health bar that you can rely on in the form of your mana bar to basically mitigate a ton of damage, which you only take after your ward bar has run out. There's a lot of adjustments to the gear you have to make to accommodate all of this gear, so I'm going to go over a couple of the main changes here now. First main changes you might see is, of course, the rings. We have red rings with int, and the int red rings are very necessary here because without the helmet, which was previously the peak of the mountain, it's very hard to crit cap. And so getting intelligence to stack the intelligence on your passive from the calculated destruction node here, it is very, very important to get that additional int so we can make back some of that crit chance that we lost. Additionally, if we're going to be putting on knowledge of the erase mage to get additional damage taken to mana, we are going to be losing a substantial amount of flat damage or base damage that we got from having the Grimoire of Necrotic Elixirs. This can be made back up from the Confluence of Fate, which gives us dot mitigation and a ton of flat spell damage that we lost. And so this gearing path works out pretty well. Finally, because the main point of taking damage to our mana is to apply all of our endurance, a really good place to get endurance here is going to be the foot of the mountain. Now, before you had transient rest on, and you are going to lose that effect of gaining the ward when you stop moving, but you're still going to put the traversal mod on to get a big burst of ward if you need by using focus teleport converted to a traversal skill. And so your total damage reduction is going to break out a little bit like this. You have 18% from the belt if you proc your meteors recently, 8% from the tree if the mob is shocked, 74% from armor, 33% endurance to mana. Additionally, when you have flame ward on your bar instead of focus, you're getting the 30% and the extra 40%, as well as the 30% from the elemental flame ward. And then on top of that, all of this is done at a 5-to-1 ratio on your mana. So you're going to be having like 12k EHP on that. And of course, none of this is even activated until you're completely out of ward, because it takes damage from your mana before health, not health and ward. It's like a backup defensive layer that you can utilize after you're completely out of ward for whatever reason. This also manages to squeeze in a dot mitigation amulet. Confluence of Fate happens to be on an Oracle amulet base, which is super, super good. If you're unaware, damage over time in super high corruption is just complete cancer, and every single point of dot mitigation you can get on the amulet as well as the gloves here is going to be very, very important. One other thing to mention here is there's a line here on the knowledge of the erase mage, which gives you endurance applies to health per missing mana. And this also gives you 60% capped endurance damage reduction on your 1.1k life pool. It's not incredible, but it is there, further increasing your EHP. So in order for you to die, you have to have all of your ward evaporated. You have to have all of your mana evaporated. And if all of your mana is evaporated, you can cast a traversal skill to get a big burst of ward back if you need it. And it has to go through your completely capped endurance life pool. But the defensive layers on this are just off the chart. Now, you're not going to go for a build like this early because because one, it requires int red rings, and two, you need a uber unique. So this is something you want to build like at the top tippy top peak of gearing. But I think with all the damage reduction layers that this build has, I think this is going to easily be able to go past 2, maybe even 3k corruption solo. There is one other thing I want to mention, and that is going to be things you want to pivot or change if you want to play this build as a solo player, because it is absolutely viable in a solo scenario. There are 2 things that this build is lacking that you're going to want to jam in if you're solo. One of them is going to be armor shred. A really good place to get that is either on amulet or the gloves here. You can basically drop the drain mod, which is basically letting you get ward back from your paladins, and in exchange you can try and get a shred armor roll here, or you can also get on your amulet, drop a dodge suffix, just have a meager amount of 20% dodge. Additionally, this build is missing necrotic penetration. Most of your damage is necrotic because of the Marina's Lost Soul here. You're also getting an extra 18 from the Confluence of Fate. So if you just look at something like Meteor, you can see the skill breakdown here. It is about 75% necrotic, maybe 25 or 30% other elements. So getting a necrotic shred blessing here is going to be very, very good for your damage. Just know that you are trading out armor or dodge to do so, but you can't really argue with 50% penetration. It's a lot of damage. Those are the 2 main adjustments you want to make if you're solo. I'm playing in a group, so I can have somebody else shred for me. I also don't need to build armor shred on my gear because somebody else can do that for me. Yeah, I just want to give this planner to you guys, give you a short video. Once again, do not try to build this until you have like the crazy gear. I would go with the first planner that I released while you're trying to get all your gear together to play this build. But this is what you should be looking for at the top end. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comment. I'm always happy to answer any questions you guys might have. And once again, I'm Snap, and thanks for watching.